This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Libyan military and police talks have concluded in Egypt. We have updates on the talks' outcomes. A French court to rule whether Rwandan genocide suspect Felician Kabuga will stand trial in France or face a UN tribunal in Tanzania. And China is holding events nationwide to honor fallen heroes on Martyrs Day. This is CGTN. Welcome to Africa Live with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. Also coming up on the program, unemployment in South Africa soars to record levels in Q2. And in your sports, organizers of the Kip Keino Classic meeting hope fans will inspire big results in Nairobi on Saturday. We start in Egypt, where talks between military and police teams from eastern and western Libya concluded on Tuesday evening. The talks were brokered by the United Nations. In a statement, the UN says the talks produced important outcomes. Libyans have agreed to hold direct military talks instead of the indirect previous rounds brokered by the United Nations. They have also agreed to put an end to hate speech in domestic media against rival factions, among other outcomes. Well, let's get more on this and cross over to Cairo. I'm joined by CGTN's Adel Mahroui from there. Adel, tell us more about what was agreed upon at the talks.
So as you said, we are talking about, it's a sort of a 5+5 military meeting on a lower representation scale that the UN has been sponsoring and coordinating with the Egyptian government to hold. The teams from both sides, military and police forces from the eastern and western Libyan rival factions, have agreed on a series of recommendations that the United Nations believe is very important for the Libyan solution and the crisis. One of the first steps is basically both parties have agreed to resume immediately the UN-sponsored 5+5 military talks in Geneva that should be taking place next month, and they both recommend to have direct talks. And by the way, one of the significance of the military talks in Egypt is that both parties have been meeting directly, sitting on the same negotiating table face to face, which has not happened. And the United Nations, during all its previous military talks, it was taking alternative negotiations with each team on their own. So this is one of the major significance. They've agreed to exchange prisoners, both military have taken from the other side during their operations and territorial expansions against the other. They've agreed to work on tuning down the polarization tone of the media of both parties so that they can diffuse the tension and the polarization among the Libyan people, which should positively reflect on political talks. They're also studying creating special forces to protect the oil fields, which both parties have interests to preserve its production and at the same time want to equally split the revenues from the oil. And finally, they're also working to, they've started to put the criteria and the vision to unify the military forces, the police, the army, in a way that would be representative to the entire Libyan people. So these are the main, they're non-binding, by the way, Beatrice, and they're going to be put as recommendations and as a beginning for the military talks by the United Nations that will be held in Geneva.
So they're going to be put forward as recommendations, Adel. And of course, this crisis in Libya has been ongoing now for close to a decade. So what is the significance of these outcomes in the Libyan peace process, and what should we expect going forward?
So first of all, this saves a lot of effort on the United Nations official 5+5 military talks. So these are the issues. So instead of just beginning from ground zero, and where the United Nations has previously declared that the meetings were failing, even to bring Libyans together. So this, first of all, we're talking about the first face-to-face meetings between these military powers who have been controlling and fighting on the ground. That's one of the major breakthroughs. And now with the recommendations that they've reached in Hurghada, this will be a great beginning for the military talks and the final peace talks that will be, and the whole world is looking actually forward to, that will be taking place in October, to have a general solution for Libya, 18 months transitional plan. And of course, the police and military, the security issue in general is the most concerning file in the Libyan crisis. Once that is resolved, the rest of the political transition should not be a big deal.
Adel Mahroui joining us there with the latest update from Libya. He's joining us live from Cairo. Thank you. And on to the latest updates now on Rwandan genocide suspect Felicien Kabuga's trial. A French court is set to rule whether Kabuga will stand trial in France or face a UN tribunal in Tanzania. In June, a Paris court ruled that he should be handed over to a UN tribunal based in Arusha. But Kabuga has contested that decision and wants to be tried in France. The 85-year-old alleged financier of the Rwandan genocide was arrested in May after 25 years on the run. Well, let's now cross over to the French capital for more on that story. And I'm joined by CGTN's Ross Cullen for more on that trial. Ross, Kabuga is fighting a French court ruling that he should stand trial at the UN tribunal in Tanzania. What reasons is his legal team citing in that appeal? And also tell us about the counter-arguments by the prosecutors.
Yeah, hi Beatrice. Well, all eyes on the Cour de Cassation, France's Supreme Court, the highest criminal court in the land, which is due to make a ruling in a couple of hours whether Felicien Kabuga should be standing trial in Tanzania at the UN tribunal in Arusha, or if he should be staying here to face trial in France. Now, his lawyers have said that the 87-year-old, or possibly 84, 85, his age is unclear. He's definitely in his late 80s though, and his lawyers say he's too frail, he's in poor health, and the medical treatment that he might be able to receive in Tanzania would be inadequate. They say he should be staying in France. He suffers from diabetes, from high blood pressure, and also from an incurable cognitive condition. For the other part, for the prosecutors, they've actually been in Rwanda in the past couple of weeks gathering fresh evidence. They want to bolster their case, and they would like to see a guilty verdict in front of the UN tribunal for Mr. Kabuga. He denies all 7 counts against him, which include genocide, complicity in genocide, and incitement to commit genocide.
Well, Ross, he has been on the run for 25 years. He is in his late 80s. Now, depending on the ruling, when should we expect that trial to start?
If the French court rules today that he should be facing trial in Tanzania, Mr. Kabuga will have 1 month to appear before judges in Arusha. If the court rules that he will be facing trial here in France, we can expect that trial to begin over a number of months, but probably into the new year. After 25 years on the run, Mr. Kabuga was finally arrested here in Paris in May, found to be living under an alias in the suburbs with false papers. It's believed that he'd used a number of safe houses during nearly a generation, fleeing from prosecutors in various countries, possibly Kenya, the DRC, into Europe as well, in Belgium, and ultimately in France. He is accused of being the financial backer behind a radio and television channel, Radio Télévision Libre des Mille Collines, which broadcasted anti-Tutsi hatred messages, also inspiring people to commit crimes. He's also accused of being the financial backer behind militia as well, which carried out crimes against humanity. He denies all those charges, and we're going to be finding out whether he stands trial in France or in Tanzania in a couple of hours.
All right, Ross Cullen joining us there from Paris. Thank you. The United Nations mission in South Sudan has urged former rival groups in the country to speed up the implementation of the 2018 peace agreement. The UN has warned that any further delays in forming a unity government could lead to renewed violence. CGTN's Patrick Oyet reports.
It has been 7 months since the formation of a new unity government started, but it has not yet been completed. A parliament due to be made up of 550 members from all former rival groups is not yet set up. The various armed groups brought together for retraining and redeployment are also yet in training camps. The United Nations mission in South Sudan says the slow progress is resulting in more violence across the country.
From January to July this year, UNMISS documented 575 incidents of subnational violence, which is 3 times higher than the number compared to last year.
The parties to the peace deal disagree on the power-sharing arrangement in the state and local governments. That is partly because the peace agreement allocates the states and local administration units to parties in percentages. Now the interpretation of those percentages into actual numbers is contentious. However, the unity government says it is making progress.
Our president and the parties to the agreement are almost finalizing the issues of the state, the power sharing in the state.
South Sudan's peace deal dictates that elections be held in 2023. The UN says it is unlikely that voting will be conducted as scheduled in the agreement.
My concern about the delay is that it risks pushing elections out well beyond the timeline of the agreement. This will add to the growing disillusionment amongst communities about whether the political will exists to give South Sudanese citizens the opportunity to choose their leaders.
There are also some armed groups opposed to the 2018 peace deal, which are still fighting the government. Another round of talks between the government and those armed groups is scheduled for early next week in Italy. The UN says it welcomes the resumption of the peace process but urges the parties to the 2018 peace deal to push the current peace process forward. Patrick Koyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
China is holding events nationwide to honor fallen heroes on Martyrs' Day. In Beijing, senior officials led by President Xi Jinping have laid flowers and paid tribute at the monument to the people's heroes in Tiananmen Square. Shang Dan has the details.
Beijing held a solemn national ceremony for China's martyrs, culminating in a moment of silence for the country's fallen heroes. Chinese President Xi Jinping, together with other senior officials, attended the event. They laid flowers and paid tribute at the monument to the people's heroes. Official figures say there have been 20 million Chinese martyrs since the First Opium War in 1840 to the founding of the People's Republic of China in 1949. And nowadays, the definition of martyrs goes way beyond war heroes, including those who've given their lives grappling with disasters, accidents, or epidemics. This year, about 2,000 representatives from across Chinese society also gathered to mark the occasion. Most worked on the front lines fighting COVID-19, including doctors, nurses, community workers, and police officers. 3 renowned experts who've helped lead China's efforts in the pandemic also attended the ceremony. They are China's top medical advisor, Zhang Boli, the head of Wuhan's Jinyintan Hospital, Zhang Dingyu, and top vaccine researcher, Chen Wei. They've all been awarded the national honorary title of People's Hero. The Chinese government has frequently stressed the contribution of such heroes to the nation's hard-earned peace and prosperity. In 2014, China's top legislature approved September 30th as Martyrs' Day, a day ahead of the National Day holiday. In the words of late Chinese leader Mao Zedong, inscribed on the monument, "Eternal glory to the people's heroes." These martyrs will be remembered forever by the Chinese nation and people. And today is dedicated to those heroes. Zhang Dan, CGTN.
China has a long tradition of commemorating and honoring those who lost their lives while serving their country. But Martyrs Day only came into being in 2014. Let's take a look at the significance of the occasion.
In August 2014, China's top legislature approved September 30th to be commemorated as Martyrs Day across the nation. The decision gave Chinese people a day dedicated to those who made the ultimate sacrifice for the greater good of the Chinese nation. It is said that this move is aimed at publicizing the martyrs' achievements and spirit and cultivating patriotism, collectivism, and socialist moralities, so as to consolidate the Chinese nation's cohesiveness. Martyrs Day, which comes just one day before China's National Day on October 1st, has a special significance. It was also the day on which the foundations were laid for the monument to the people's heroes in 1949, which stands at the heart of Beijing's Tiananmen Square.
You're watching Africa Live, still ahead on the program. In the race for the White House, Trump and Biden face off in the first presidential debate. And concerns mount over unemployment among deaf people in Uganda.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
The much-anticipated first U.S. presidential debate between Donald Trump and the Democratic challenger Joe Biden turned chaotic as the two lobbed insults at each other in Cleveland. The latest poll from CBS News Battleground Tracker shows 48% of viewers polled say Biden won the debate, while 41% say Trump did. Our reporter Dan Williams has more details.
Same question to you, Vice.
Anger, chaos, and at times downright ugly, this first presidential debate between President Trump and the former Vice President Joe Biden. The two interrupting each other constantly throughout as they clashed on pretty much every single topic. Will be remembered for a number of passengers, no doubt, including when Joe Biden called President Trump a clown, a racist, and the worst president ever in the history of America, while Trump repeatedly attacked Biden over law and order, as well as claims over his son, Hunter Biden also. As I say, they clashed on all of the topics: COVID-19, the economy, race, as well as election integrity as well. This is how the evening developed.
Tensions were running high in Cleveland.
Will you shut up, man? Listen, who is on your list, Joe?
And the two rivals didn't pull any punches.
Oh, give me a break. Because you know what? There's nothing smart about you, Joe. 47 years.
Plenty of finger-pointing and personal attacks.
You're the worst president America has ever had.
Hey,
Come
Joe,
on.
let me just tell you, Joe. I've done more in 47 months. I've done more than you've done in 47 years, Joe.
One of the biggest conflicts that arose had to do with racial inequality. Protests that have consumed the public sphere for months came to the fold, with left and right-wing violence taking center stage. President Trump defended a key campaign theme of his, law and order, while Joe Biden pressed Trump to denounce the far right. But as the U.S. is facing mounting issues, including the coronavirus, the economic fallout from the shutdown, and protests against police violence, the debate highlighted the divide in addressing those issues.
Remains to be seen exactly what will come from that and what will be taken from this quite fiery presidential debate. It's clear that this was all about appealing to their base voters, motivating them to get out and to vote. But quite what this all means in terms of the election as a whole, well, that remains to be seen.
The 75th United Nations General Assembly has drawn to a close in what has been a dramatically different coming together of world powers. The pandemic forced the majority of speeches and high-level meetings to be conducted online, and COVID-19 was also a main topic of discussions during the session. William Denslow reports from the UN headquarters in New York.
The United Nations was forged in the wake of World War II. 75 years later, and the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres says the global community faces a 1945 moment.
The pandemic is a clear test of international cooperation, a test we have essentially failed.
COVID-19 has now claimed the lives of more than 1 million people worldwide. And at a Security Council coronavirus meeting held during the UN General Assembly, world powers remain divided.
I'm actually really quite ashamed of this council. Members of the council who took this opportunity to focus on political grudges rather than the critical issue at hand.
I must say, enough is enough. You have created enough troubles for the world already.
During the UN general debates, US President Donald Trump attacked China's COVID-19 response and environmental record.
Beijing has dismissed Washington's COVID-19 accusations as baseless. And addressing the UN, President Xi Jinping called for a green recovery and announced that China will be carbon neutral before 2060.
The announcement came during Climate Week, an event running parallel to the UNGA in New York.
In the absence of particularly American leadership on climate change, it's incredibly important for countries like China and regions like the European Union to step up to show that they are still committed to acting on this very important issue.
On the final day of speeches at the UN, Israel and the UAE expressed hope for Middle East peace after their recent agreement to normalise relations. The DPRK ought to address the international community.
As we have obtained the reliable and effective war deterrent for self-defense by tightening our belts, peace and security of the Korean Peninsula and the region are now firmly defended.
The theme of the 75th UNGA is the future we want, the UN we need. The body's Sustainable Development Goals provide the roadmap, but COVID-19 has blown the international community off course. The UN is now calling for funding to be secured to ensure the SDGs don't become another victim of the pandemic. William Denslow for CGTN at the United Nations headquarters in New York.
Meanwhile, the UN Security Council has called on Armenian and Azerbaijani armed forces to immediately stop fighting over the long-disputed border region of Nagorno-Karabakh. In a statement adopted unanimously during emergency talks on Tuesday, the Council urged both sides to de-escalate tensions and return to meaningful negotiations right away. The two countries have been at odds for decades in a territorial dispute over Karabakh. Nearly 100 people have died so far, and now there are concerns the conflict will escalate into a wider regional unrest. Michelle David has more from Istanbul.
Armenia and Azerbaijan reported more casualties as clashes continued in Nagorno-Karabakh on Tuesday. Civilians caught in the fighting were seen being treated at a hospital in the disputed region. Both sides accused each other of using heavy artillery, as damage to residential areas was also reported. Armenian officials also claimed one of its Su-25 aircraft had been shot down by Turkish fighter jets, an accusation Ankara strongly denied. Turkish officials did, however, state that Turkey would support Azerbaijan by all means, while Russia has urged for an end to hostilities and specifically called on Turkey to use its influence.
The Kremlin's primary position is the need for an early ceasefire. Any statements about military support or activity add fuel to the fire. We are categorically against this, and we do not agree with this way of posing the question. We call on all countries, especially our partners such as Turkey, to do everything to convince the warring parties to cease fire.
During his visit to Greece, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo also spoke out following his talks with the Greek foreign minister.
that the foreign minister and I also addressed the conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh, where both sides must stop the violence and work with the Minsk group co-chairs to return to substantive negotiations as quickly as possible.
France is also urging talks among the Minsk group, made up of France, Russia, and the United States. The group was formed in the 1990s and previously mediated talks between Armenia and Azerbaijan that ultimately failed. Germany is urging calm, too, with Chancellor Merkel adding her voice to international calls for an immediate ceasefire. Michal Vardavid, CGTN.
In Uganda, a social enterprise called Sikia Foundation is pushing for the employment of more deaf people facing economic hardship brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. They are concerned that with a weak labor market, deaf people are having an even tougher time getting a job because of stereotypes surrounding their disability. CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga has that report.
Aida Nambi is a chef at Sikia Cafe in Jinja, eastern Uganda. She got this job after being denied an opportunity elsewhere.
Previously, I was working at a factory that makes matchboxes and also doing part-time work at the salon where I learned how to plait hair. But they could despise me because I was deaf. I would plait hair and they cheat me. It was difficult to talk to them because they didn't know sign language. I decided to leave. Then I got this job.
And in order to change people's perception about people like Nambi, Sikia Foundation is setting up small-scale businesses that offer employment opportunities to the deaf.
We wanted to show other employers and other entrepreneurs that there are many people out there who have been left out of the labor market because of very minor differences. Sign language is just another form of language.
Most of the waiters and waitresses here are deaf. A customer can use either sign language or write on a piece of paper to place an order. This restaurant employs about 8 people with speech impairment and hard to hear. The owners here believe through this initiative they are bridging the communication gap between the community and persons with disability. The interaction has helped customers learn a new language.
Actually downloaded an app, it is on my phone. I appreciated a few things, maybe like counting 1 up to 10. And I can tell if I didn't come to this place here, I wouldn't ever have thought about maybe what are some of the things people communicate. And it's a whole language out there.
But like many other businesses, this one also got a hit from COVID-19. They say the pandemic slowed down their business, forcing them to work in shifts. To further reduce unemployment among the deaf, the foundation is extending the assistance to youth.
Let's say we have a number of youth in Jinja, maybe 500 deaf youth. We want to get them, assist them to write their CVs, assist them to document their skills, assist if there is any company hiring, we can go and start knocking on doors.
According to government figures, over 2 million Ugandans suffer hearing loss. Rights defenders hope that initiatives like Sikia Foundations can help reduce unemployment among deaf people and promote the use of sign language in the community. Hilary Ayesiga, CGTN, Jinja, Eastern Uganda.
Egypt is one of the most important transit points in the world for migratory birds. This week, the country's Environment Ministry has shone the spotlight on one of its best bird-watching locations in Sharm el-Sheikh and announced plans to market the activity in coming months. Adil Mahroui tells us more.
Situated between 3 continents, Egypt's unique location has helped make it a leading attraction to bird watchers. The country lies along 5 known migratory paths for bird coming from East Asia and Europe to Africa. Sinai is the juncture between Africa and Asia, and it's therefore an ideal location for bird watching.
It's very important to conserve the migratory birds and to protect them because that is an international commitment. It has been there worldwide. Egypt is the second country at large that has the path for the migratory birds, over 1 million bird that passes over Egypt in 2 seasons each year. Our success is to show that ecotourism is not only about the marine life. Ecotourism can include the bird watching.
A new government policy aims to make maximum use of Egypt's environmental treasures. Bird watching is on top of that list that should widen the scope for ecotourism. The country plans to heavily market bird watching in the coming months, as it shares the Convention on Biological Diversity this year.
The bird watching is one of the ecotourism activities that has specific tourists that would like to see that. But also we are opening another opportunities for jobs. It is not only the touristic companies that work on that. We have collected a number of tourist guides and we have gave them training and license to be licensed as environmental tourists.
Last July, Egypt won the Energy Globe Award for its migratory bird preservation project. The Ministry of Environment says it will be expanding projects in that field.
What happened in COVID-19 showed us clearly that nature does not need us. We were all locked down in our homes and houses, so conserving the biodiversity is no more a luxury. It is really a necessity that we need all to abide to.
Egypt is capitalizing on the fact that it is a transitional hub for more than 1 million migratory birds. Here in Sharm el-Sheikh is one of the spots that witnesses more than 700 different varieties all year long. And with this opportunity, Egypt is trying to add to its many attractions for tourists who come to visit. Adil Mahroui, CGTN, Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt.
And your business news is coming up next. Here's what's ahead. Nigeria sets up a new outfit to help recover stolen assets in foreign countries. And unemployment in South Africa soars to record levels in Q2.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Sudan and South Sudan have agreed a draft deal to develop oil cooperation, which includes resuming production from key oil fields. Under the agreement, production at the Unity and Toma South fields will be prioritized, with 15,000 barrels per day from Block 5A expected to come online. Landlocked South Sudan relies on Sudan to export its crude oil in a pipeline via Khartoum to the Red Sea. Both countries, which depend heavily on oil revenues, have seen their economies devastated by the coronavirus pandemic. The pandemic wrought havoc on oil prices and demand. The deal includes details on the transfer of crude from South Sudan to Sudan for its own domestic use. South Sudan pays Sudan 4 fees for every barrel produced. This includes a transportation fee, a processing fee, a transit, and the non-commercial tariff, which is part of a transitional financial arrangement. Well, the exportation of oil has finally resumed in Libya. Over the weekend, the eastern-based Libyan National Army lifted the force majeure on the oil terminals it considered safe. The LNA blockaded Libya's oil ports in January. Oil production in the North African nation is expected to rise to around 260,000 barrels per day next week, up from some 100,000 barrels per day before the blockade. CGTN's Adil Mahroui has the details.
Libya is officially back in the international oil business. This week, tankers began lining up at 3 operating oil terminals to ship the black gold to international customers. So far, production has reached 250,000 barrels a day, nearly triple the volumes produced before the oil blockade by the Libyan National Army commander Khalifa Haftar.
Oil is the main source of foreign currency to Libya. No sane man could take the decision to stop oil production, but at the same time, no sane man should accept the disproportionate sharing of Libya's wealth. The resumption of exportation is a great step that will relieve the hardships of all citizens.
Haftar's decision to resume production came after an agreement with his Western rivals to create a joint committee that overlooks the oil production and fairly distributes revenues among Libya's 3 main territories. 3 years ago, and after accusations against the government of National Accord of using oil revenues to fuel the civil war, the LNA took control of the oil ports.
When the oil fields were under the management of Western militias that backed the government of National Accord, it reported only 80,000 barrels daily of oil production. When the Libyan National Army gained control over the oil fields in 2017, specifically the Oil Crescent, the official production volume multiplied.
Libya is estimated to have lost at least $10 billion since the LNA's oil blockade began last January. That has led to severe deterioration in public services, including days of power cuts in one of Africa's biggest oil producers. North Africa's highest oil-producing country has the capacity to churn out 1.35 million barrels daily. Because of the logistical hassle of repumping oil from fields, it's highly unlikely for Khalifa Haftar to freeze production once again. And that is good news for Libyans who are living under one of the most devastating conflicts in the region. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
The Nigerian government has approved the formation of a new anti-corruption agency which will help with the management of recovered assets from outside the country. And as CGTN's Enoxi Collier reports, the decision has drawn mixed reactions throughout Nigeria.
Nigeria's new anti-corruption agency will be known as the Proceeds of Crime Recovery and Management Agency. It will have the responsibility of proper management of all assets seized in Nigeria or returned from abroad. According to the government, recovered assets are currently scattered across different agencies without proper control. Nigerians, however, see this move as yet another waste of resources.
As for me, I don't think it's too relevant in this particular season. That's not what we need now. What Nigerians need is our government to be productive.
I see no reason why we have ICPC, we have EFCC, then creating another agency that will still carry out the same function just like EFCC or ICPC. To me, such money should be channeled into a different sector of the economy.
Nigeria has so far recovered over $300 million of stolen funds this year alone.
Nigerians want to see how these recovered assets would be used for the benefit of Nigerians and will not be relooted. Nigerians want to see how they can have access to this information of recovered loots. Nigerians want to see visible, usage, utilization of this recovered asset. If Nigerian government can demonstrate in a very clear terms this greater accountability and transparency in the recovered asset, then Nigerians will appreciate what government is doing.
The Proceeds of Crime Recovery and Management Agency will handle all proceeds from crime and corruption in the country. The Federal Executive Council has already approved the transmission of a bill to the National Assembly. The bill will undergo further deliberations and approval before its establishment. Enoxi Collier, CGTN.
Meanwhile, the Nigerian government is pushing to reverse a persistent trend of deficits in its annual budget. The country's finance minister says budget and treasury experts have been deployed to various agencies to drive up revenue. CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam reports.
a crucial meeting of Nigeria's finance officials. The country's dwindling revenue is at the core of conversations here. The oil-dependent economy is tethering on the edge of an economic downturn, its worst in nearly 4 decades. It is fueled by the fall in price of crude oil and effects of the COVID-19 pandemic.
We are all aware that we are facing serious fiscal challenges as a nation, and the only solution available to us is to diversify from the volatile oil revenue and look inwards into the non-oil revenues with special attention to the federal government-owned enterprises.
The government reported a 50% drop in revenues in the first half of the year. Now they're looking inward to explore possible revenue potentials, and finance and revenue experts are expected to harness it.
One of the possible solutions is to look into the non-oil sources of revenues, to take advantage of their potentials and to make them robust. We have seen the positive impact on the increase in VAT revenue through the instrumentality of the Finance Act 2019, and also the efforts that have been taken by various arms of government in diversifying the revenue base of government by the revenue-generating agencies. An important sector with huge potentials of revenue generation is the federal government-owned enterprises. The analysis of the revenue and expenditure profile of some of these federal government-owned enterprises show that they have the capacities for improved revenue generation performance.
The vision of this initiative is to ensure that we achieve transparency and accountability of government revenue with special focus to federal government-owned enterprises, improved revenue performance, and ultimately provide sustainable source of funding for government budget execution.
Nigeria's budget deficit for 2020 stands at $27.2 billion. Government has been borrowing to meet up with the shortfall. The Bureau of Statistics puts the country's total debt stock at a staggering $74 billion. But authorities are optimistic about the prospects of government-owned agencies for improved revenue performance. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Egypt is set to issue sovereign green bonds, which will be the first of their kind in the Middle East and North Africa. The issuance is expected to be carried out before the end of 2020. The program will help the North African nation raise capital from investors who care for both environmental and financial returns. The issuance of international government green bonds in the global markets will enhance the country's environmental rating as well as increase foreign investor confidence in the Egyptian economy. The nation has a portfolio of eligible green projects of $1.9 billion, of which approximately 16% for renewable energy, 19% for clean transportation, 26% for sustainable water and wastewater management, and 39% for pollution prevention. Now, the number of people with jobs in South Africa fell to the lowest in 9 years in the second quarter, even as the official unemployment rate dropped. According to Statistics South Africa, the number of people who are unemployed fell by 2.2 million to 14.1 million in the quarter. That's the lowest since the third quarter of 2011. The official unemployment rate in Africa's most industrialized economy now stands at 23.3% compared to the first quarter's 30.1%. The decreases were observed in the formal sector at 10.8%, followed by the informal sector at about 22%, private households at 23.6%, and the agricultural sector at 7.6%. South Africa imposed a strict coronavirus lockdown at the end of March, which has squeezed businesses and consumers. And we still have more news, views and analysis for you here on the program. Stay with us.
Join us in global business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Catholic clerics are known for their traditional priestly duties, including conducting masses and hearing confessions, among other things. But it's hard to find a priest who has also taken up a career in music. But as Kelechi Emeka tells us, one Nigerian clergyman is not only known as a preacher, but he has become a professional rapper as well.
The sound of music is one of the greatest thrills for Catholic priest Father Ralph. He has spent several years building skills in various genres like Afro-pop, hip-hop and rap. And it's earned him so much popularity and respect in Nigeria's music industry. So much so that he has collaborated with several top musicians, including Flavor and Onyeka Owenu. So far, he has about 20 recorded projects under his name. But building his career wasn't a walk in the park.
People just presume that a priest, since it's not his main domain, he may not be, so to speak, a professional in music. And so one of the challenges is convincing people by the content itself, by the quality rather itself, that you can do very professional music even as a priest.
The best part of working with Father Ralph is that he's spontaneous. Yes, he's very, 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 for me that it thrills me, because we could be on a part and next minute he wants to switch it. That's the best thing. A lot of people are very, very static, stagnant. So he's very, very spontaneous. That spontaneity is all I need for me, for my music, and it adds juice to the whole vibe, because we could be going one direction and we could be feeling it, or it could be boring and he could just come up with just that, boom, and everything changes.
Father Ralph's clerical position remains an integral part of his life too. He ensures that his career as a musician doesn't affect his calling as a priest, and that has endeared him to many of his fans and parishioners.
I've seen a lot of people drawn to him because of the talent of being a priest and being a musician. So I watched while he came how the Paduma parish had grown greatly. Same with Kobe. He used to have an adoration program every Tuesday in Kobe, and the church is just, once they knew he's coming, and throughout the adoration period is just songs, and you just get inspired. You just get carried away while he's on stage and he's doing his thing.
Based on the way he's going in his music career, the sky will not be his limit. It's going to be his starting point.
Despite the challenges, Father Ralph has successfully broken down the barriers between the music and the cassock. His work centers on courage, love, faith and hope. He holds a special passion for the youth and hopes to reach many more through his music. Kelechi Emeka, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Let's now take a look at your sports news. Here's what's ahead. Organizers of the Kip Keino Classic meeting hope fans will inspire big results in Nairobi on Saturday.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours?
sports scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's start your sport in Kenya, where 5 organizers of the annual Belgian Memorial Van Damme Diamond League meeting are in the country to help in the final preparations for Saturday's Kip Keino Classic in Nairobi. The event will be the first World Athletics Continental Tour meeting on African soil. At least 150 athletes from 32 countries have been confirmed for the meeting that will be the 7th and the final stop of the 2020 Continental Tour that was shortened due to the pandemic. Limited fans will be allowed to attend the first post-COVID-19 athletics event on the continent. And according to Dimitri Strobans, an organizer of the Van Damme meet, and Lennart Andelhoff from the Challenge Tour, this could inspire the athletes to top performances.
A lot of things are changing. In Brussels, we organized a meeting in a stadium with a capacity of 50,000 people without public. So, but for the athletes, everything ran smoothly. We had 4 world records. I think on Saturday we will have public in the stadium, very limited. But I think that's better for the athletes to perform.
Brussels, we had extra sound. We put extra sound of spectators in the empty stadium. We hoped at that way we get still the feeling of a full stadium, and I think we did that because we had 4 world records. Hopefully, with the amount of people we have here, we can still make enough noise for the athletes. I hope in the next years we can have again full stadiums, because that is what we need, and actually also the fans need to see our athletes running.
We now take a trip down South Africa, where despite its undisputed status as the leading force in motorsports in the continent, the country is yet to produce a female driver. But the prospect of Africa hosting the WRC next year has piqued interest among women like Letsego Zulu, who is gaining a reputation as an expert navigator. Here's CGTN's Julie Shire with her story.
Letsego Zulu was a natural from the first moment she got into a racing car 2 years ago. She's teamed up with veteran racer Terrence Marsh as an off-road navigator.
What ticks me is the thrill, it's the adventure, it's the intense office that navigating really is. I need to keep the car safe, I need to make sure that I give him the correct instructions in order for us to make it from the start to the finish.
From the first time I ever